This is the intent of the groyper war. This is to train everybody to ask specific, direct questions. Pay attention to the answer. Did you get a clear answer to the question that you asked? I'd like to ask you a very explicit question. This isn't confusing. Do you stand with Ben Shapiro, who says that Nick should not be allowed to be on such a mainstream platform to access millions of viewers? Or are you your own man? Do you adhere by God's freedom of conscience, blessed upon all people, and our American Constitution that protects that God-given right? Do you stand with America and God? Or do you stand with Ben Shapiro? Do you stand with cancel culture? Or do you stand with the free marketplace and exchange of ideas? Do you think Michael Knowles answered that question directly as obviously as he should have? This isn't a complicated question, you guys.
The destruction of human freedom. But like every one of the super states that preceded it, it has one iron rule. Logic is an enemy and truth is a menace.
Good afternoon and welcome to Beholden To Truth. It is your humble host, Joshua, here in the magnificent outdoors for a change. How do you guys like this setup? It's pretty nice, I gotta say. It's a little bit cool outside here in Alabama. We're shifting into the winter, fall season. So I wanted to take advantage of the beautiful weather while we still have it. Soon I won't be able to sit out here and do vlogs. I guess I could wear one of my Save Europa or Anti-Zog hoodies sitting out here. Maybe I'll do that, sit by the fire pit, something like that. That would be a pretty cozy vibe, honestly. Yeah, I might have to check that out. But anyway, I have a fun topic for us to get into today. I was scrolling Instagram and the fallout continues to fall out post Tucker Carlson interviewing Nick Fuentes. And so I think I did a vlog yesterday going over the $7,000 Club's response to this. All of the Josh Hammer, Seth Dillon, Mark Levin, Ben Shapiro's, Officer Tatum's of this world, and their response to Tucker having the audacity to invite Nick Fuentes on his show for a long format conversation, simply allowing Nick to explain his views in his own words rather than being clipped in 30-second intervals or people reading hit job articles about him. How about this? How about the guy tells you what he believes directly? I know, pretty crazy in the land of free speech to do such a thing, but that is what the Jewish influence, the Israel lobby, the people who pull the puppet strings on the media, our government, and so on, they didn't really enjoy that conversation. So I did a vlog about their larger response to that. But I was scrolling Instagram this afternoon and I saw that Michael Knowles, who obviously works for the Daily Wire, was confronted at a speaking event by a groyper talking about this exact subject. About, hey, so we all saw Tucker interview Nick. We saw how that went. The overwhelming majority of the public enjoyed it. Strangely enough, 2% of the population thought it was the next Holocaust. So I'd like your opinion on that observation of everybody seeming to be okay with this. It's just two Americans sitting down exercising their free speech. Maybe one of them is a little radical in their beliefs, but he's sitting there with an older man who's been in journalism and politics for 40 years. What's wrong with these two having a conversation?
Hi, Mike. It's great that you came here today because, and also talked about the many factions within the conservative movement, because just today, it is pretty safe to say that Ben Shapiro pretty much declared war between the neocons and the America First movement, and pretty much against anyone who would, Tucker Carlson, PPD, or anyone who would platform, dare I say his name, the Voldemort, Nick Fuentes. So, given that, I ask you that, do you have, it's basically forced people to take sides, and do you completely support or do you deviate at all from Ben Shapiro in this sense?
Do I deviate from Ben Shapiro? I've been deviating from Ben Shapiro for 10 years. What are you doing? He and I have, on Daily Wire airwaves, been debating all manner of issues for 10 years, which is kind of the point of Daily Wire. I mean, that's the reason that you have a Ben there and me and a Matt Walsh and all the rest. So yes, that's not my strategy. You know, I think my strategy for all of the various factions of the right, factions that have been longstanding within the right, groups that want to enter into the right, groups that campaign for Democrat candidates and oppose Republican candidates but are still putatively on the right, all of these matters. My strategy on it vis-a-vis Election Day, which, you know, it's Monday before a major election day in New York, in New Jersey, in Virginia, my inclination is to remain focused on the prize. You know, there are major contests that are going to set the stage for the midterm elections, and then we'll set the stage for the 2028 presidential election. What you mentioned is really interesting, too, because notice what we weren't talking about. You mentioned Ben, or Tucker, or Fuentes, or this person, or that. Not one of those people holds public office. Not one of those people writes bills. No, they're pundits, so they offer intellectual diagnoses. They also offer entertainment and have popular podcasts and streams and things, which is great. Some of my best friends are podcasters. I love it. Hell, it pays my mortgage. But I just think that can very often become a distraction. And it is an example of the American right sometimes getting a little too insular and playing a little inside baseball, because frankly, much of the American voting public has no idea about infighting and antagonisms and hostilities, doesn't pay attention to that, maybe has never heard of one or more of those people. And that's probably good. Those are the normal people. I think we frankly should encourage more of that, even though it might hurt our bottom lines. And so I just think when these hostilities and antagonisms, I mean, I've been friends with Ben for a decade, and I was on Tucker's show a month or two ago, had a lovely breakfast with Tucker, and saw him again a few weeks ago. They love to focus on all sort of inside baseball. When those antagonisms touch on real, concrete, practical politics, then I will concern myself. When those antagonisms lead to tens of thousands of voters switching sides in some swing state, Michigan or something, then I will concern myself with that. Then I think it will be important to really focus on that. In the meantime, it seems to me like these are personal fights that go back a long ways, and in some ways intersect with public policy, and in some ways are kind of personal. And that's fine, they can hash it out, but that's not my concern. I think it's better for the right-wing coalition to keep our eyes on the prize. As I mentioned in my speech, if we're gonna circumscribe coalitions, as all coalitions must be, we do that out of the public eye, we do that in a mature, manly, Nixonian way, and we keep on and carry on.
And so, succinctly, the groyper asked Michael Knowles, we saw Ben Shapiro's response to the tune of a 40-minute screed about Tucker Carlson and how Tucker has allied himself with neo-Nazism and anti-Semites. And obviously, Ben was very, very unhappy. His feathers were quite riled over Tucker having this conversation with Nick. So obviously, the commonality here is that Michael Knowles works at Daily Wire with Ben Shapiro. And so we wanted to see, this is exactly what Nick has solicited all the groypers to do, is to confront these people, these influencers, these politicians, these media figures directly, and ask them point blank, do you see a difference between America first? America must be a sovereign country. We can't be beholden to any foreign nation lobbying our government, any foreign actors owning our media conglomerates, any kind of blackmail networks that are facilitated by foreigners. Frankly, in terms of religion, any kind of religion other than Christianity influencing our cultural fabric or future of America. We want to ask these questions directly to the people who have wavered on these topics before, or perhaps even undermined these topics before and acted as gatekeepers to not allow these conversations to take place, especially on their platforms. So that is the solicitation Nick put out there for all groypers. This is Groyper War 3. Just like Groyper War 1 was going to Turning Point USA events and college campus tours and confronting the likes of Charlie Kirk and Matt Walsh, Dan Crenshaw. Nowadays, Groyper War 3, same old thing, same recipe. It worked the first time, it's going to work this time. And the thing is about this, though, these individuals have typically been commentating on politics for 10 plus years. They do it professionally for a living. They have writers behind the scenes helping them with their episodes, and they have bosses who tell them what they can and can't say. And so they are somewhat boxed in when it comes to actual extemporaneous speaking when confronted about these subjects. They typically have to default back to talking points or platitudes. And we want to call attention when that happens with these individuals because it demonstrates who they are beholden to, certainly not beholden to the truth. And so this groyper asks a string of questions to Michael Knowles. And he brings up the fact that just last night, only 24 hours after Ben Shapiro went on his 40-minute long screed towards Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes, I'd like to ask you a very explicit question. This isn't confusing. Do you stand with Ben Shapiro and Ben Shapiro's opinion that Tucker should not have platformed Nick Fuentes? It's an easy question to answer. We live in a country of free speech. It's not a constitutionally protected right. It is a God-given right. Do you stand with Ben Shapiro, who says that Nick should not be allowed to be on such a mainstream platform to access millions of viewers? Or are you your own man? Do you adhere by God's freedom of conscience, blessed upon all people, and our American Constitution that protects that God-given right? Do you stand with America and God? or do you stand with Ben Shapiro? Do you stand with cancel culture, or do you stand with the free marketplace and exchange of ideas? Do you think Michael Knowles answered that question directly, as obviously as he should have? This isn't a complicated question, you guys. Well, sadly, Michael Knowles, in my opinion, lets us down, and I'm going to talk through a couple of my observations, how he slithered around the question, obfuscated, created distractions, rather than just addressing the question straight on and answering how he absolutely should answer as somebody who claims to be conservative, as someone who is Catholic himself, as a white man, an Italian himself. Well, he starts his answer off by, and by the way, guys, I have my notes here on paper because I don't have my iPad out like I normally do when I'm doing vlogs from the car. His first response to, do you stand with Ben Shapiro or do you stand with America First, was, well, I think we should focus on the prize here. What prize is he referring to? He says, well, today is one day before Election Day here in America. There's mayoral elections in New York and other states today. And he says, that's what's really important. You know, we shouldn't be talking about this infighting between different conservative influencers, perhaps even undermining the larger conservative movement with all of this infighting. What we should really be focused on is talking to the masses, making sure they go to the ballot box. Don't let these Democrats win in these cities. Of course, we're not happy with Democrats winning in these cities. And of course, we believe that you should participate in the elections so long as there is somebody who actually represents our America First views. But was that an answer to the question? Need I remind you, the question was, do you stand with Ben Shapiro saying Nick Fuentes shouldn't have a voice, and Tucker Carlson inviting Nick on his show? Do you stand with them or do you stand with Ben Shapiro? And he says, I think we should focus on the elections. This is the intent of the groyper war. This is to train everybody to ask specific, direct questions. Pay attention to the answer. Did you get a clear answer to the question that you asked? Clearly not with that response. What's going on, you guys? It is yours truly, Joshua, founder of Beholden To Truth. Just wanted to say, if you'd like to help out the platform, go to beholdentotruth.com. You can get yourself something from the merch line, some of these anti-Zog occupation sleeveless t-shirts, tank tops, hoodies, joggers, sweat shorts, whatever you may need for whatever season you are in. We got them at beholdentotruth.com. It goes a long way in supporting the platform and waking people up. I've had several people come up to me at the gas station, at the gym, at the grocery store. Hey man, I like that shirt. You know what that means. And it kicks off a conversation. We're swapping Instagrams. This is how you meet people who know what's going on, who probably share much of the same worldview that you do. It's an open invitation for everybody to just step right in. So I appreciate you guys' support. Head to beholdentotruth.com and get your own. He says it's too much of a distraction focusing on the pundits, the Tucker Carlsons, Nick Fuentes, even he himself, Ben Shapiro. He says, listen, guys, when it comes to the elections, I should probably say at this point, those elections are not for influencers. They're not for podcasters, right? You're electing a governmental official, a mayor, governor, district attorney, vice president, president, congress member. He says you really should just pay attention to those decisions, the decisions about what politician we are allowing you to vote for in this rigged two-party system. Pay all of your attention to casting votes at the ballot box for these groomed, pre-screened candidates who the parties have chosen for you, who the GOP says you're allowed to vote for. Pay attention to those people. Pay attention to J.D. Vance and pay attention to Donald Trump. Don't pay attention to Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes. These guys who are just influencers, they're just political pundits. That's a distraction. What you should do is listen to the words that politicians say. In parentheses, what he's not saying is pay attention to the words that are financed by big pharma, big agriculture, big oil, foreign lobbying such as AIPAC. Pay attention to the words that are literally scripted to be what you want to hear. By the way, politicians say anything that will bring you to vote for them with no intention necessarily of actually doing that thing. with no belief themselves that they can achieve that thing. Mass immigration, we're going to have a robust tariff system like we did 100 years ago. Donald Trump said, hey, I'm thinking about ending the federal income tax. Joe Biden said, hey, I think I'm going to forgive everybody's student debt. Donald Trump said he's going to have the war in Ukraine and Russia ended in 24 hours. Donald Trump said he was going to drain the swamp. Donald Trump said he's going to expose the Epstein files. Of course, those were all things that we wanted to hear. Did we actually receive any of those things? Of course not. And so one of the messages Nick has been trying to hammer home with his audience for years now is that paying more attention to politicians and what politicians say than people who are fully independent and not beholden to lobbyists, think tanks, foreign money. We have to flip that and say, actually, we should be taking our understanding of politics and taking our understanding of the economy, of our relationship with other foreign nations, the cultural situation in America, the demographic situation in America. Take commentary on all of those subjects from people who are not being paid to lie to you. How about that? Or is that just a distraction, Michael Knowles? Is it just a distraction to put so much energy into listening to people who actually aren't in a conflict of interest, whether they're being blackmailed or financially compromised in any other sort of way? I think actually those people are more important to listen to at this point in time than the people who are, as I said, beholden to any number of special interest groups, being blackmailed, etc. And the evidence of this is so obviously clear when you just look up who has received money from AIPAC. Look up who did Epstein have personal relationships with. Look up who said that they were going to do something and then, sorry, kind of forgot about that. When I said no foreign wars, I actually didn't mean Ukraine and Russia, and I didn't mean bombing Iran, and I didn't mean starting a war with Venezuela. 3 wars in half a year from the No New Wars candidate. Stunning, absolutely stunning, the promises being upheld by Donald Trump, right? So when he says focus on the prize is elections. The prize is not a better understanding of why things are the way they are around you. And then he says it's too much of a distraction focusing on the pundits. He doubles down on this and says, you know what? The average person, normal people were the words he used. They don't even know who these pundits are. Okay. And he says it jokingly and the audience laughs. You know, normal people don't even know who Nick Fuentes is. Normal people don't even know who Tucker Carlson is. Are you sure about that, Michael Knowles? Are you sure about the multi-million following of Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Nick himself, you yourself, Ben Shapiro? You're all political pundits. You don't think normal people are watching you guys? You don't think that you guys are opinion makers? And so it's just casting this net of various responses that have nothing to do with the direct question he was asked. Do you stand with Ben Shapiro or do you stand with Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, and America First free speech? He says, well, this specific matter, I think we should focus on the prize. The prize is the elections. All of these influencers are too much of a distraction. Normal people don't even know who these people are, the influencers, the pundits. Okay, when are you going to answer the question, Michael Knowles? And he says, when these antagonists touch on something important, well, then I'll focus on what they have to say. So Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes haven't been talking about anything important? You don't think you should address the changing demographic in America? You don't think you should address the apostasy in America? You don't think you should address foreign influence in our government? How are these things not important? Nick has been talking about these things for 10 years. The mass immigration, legal and non-legal. The falling away from the church. You're a Catholic. You bring it up all the time on your show. You don't think those things are important? Those are the things Nick stands for. The cultural fabric, need I say, the culture is directly tied to the people, their faith, and the soil. So even to call Tucker or Nick antagonists, that might actually be factually true in the fact that they are antagonists against a compromised, occupied government. Sure, they may be antagonists to the people who have been running our country, controlling our media, controlling our education, capturing our economy, opening our borders. Yeah, they are certainly antagonists to those people, but they're not antagonists to America in any way, shape, or form. They're trying to protect it. So whenever these antagonists have something important to talk about, oh, well, then Michael Knowles will grant them his attention. But until then, they don't get his attention, and you shouldn't be paying attention to them either. This is all wrapped up in Michael Knowles' response to, do you stand with Ben Shapiro or do you stand with Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes and free speech? And then he says, in my opinion, we should keep these personal conflicts out of the public eye. The Nixonian approach. If you have problems with people within the Republican Party, because that's how narrow Michael Knowles' political commentary typically is, it's just Democrats versus Republicans, it's left versus right. If there's any people who are on the right, whether that's mainstream commercial conservatism, the Turning Point USAs, the Daily Wire followers, the Fox News watchers, they really don't want to have anything to do with people further right than them, the so-called alt-right. But even if they were willing to sit down and have a conversation with them, which virtually nobody has been willing to do, but in a hypothetical make-believe world that Michael Knowles is entertaining, even if Tucker Carlson or Ben Shapiro had disagreements with the individuals on the far right, such as Nick Fuentes, they should really discuss those things in private. They shouldn't be doing 2-hour podcasts where they sit down and talk through the beef that they had with each other. Where you had Nick saying, hey man, Tucker, I thought you were a Fed based on your father being in the CIA, based on your cooperation and collaboration with Max Blumenthal to write a hit job article about me. You have a suspicious past in terms of your rise to fame coinciding with the Trump presidency, contradicting things you had said about Trump in private while he was the president, despite the fact that you were gaslighting him while you were on Fox News. There's plenty of reasons why I don't trust you, Tucker. Hey, let's be men and talk about these things. And Tucker to Nick Fuentes, the same. Tucker says, hey, the reason I thought you were a Fed, I thought you were a saboteur, perhaps even a Democrat agent, is because who I see as America First, J.D. Vance, Joe Kent, Marjorie Taylor Greene, you're going after them all the time on your nightly show. You're saying these people can't be trusted. They're not actually America First. And so from my eyes, these are the only individuals standing up to the neoconservative, dominated conservative world. I thought, why would you possibly attack these people who are directly criticizing neoconservatism and countless, endless wars on behalf of foreign nations? Why would you criticize them? So that's what Tucker wanted to explain to Nick. And the two of them, as I said, sat down as men and they talked through these subjects. And frankly, I don't think either of their minds was 100% changed about each other, but that wasn't the objective. The objective was discourse. The objective was bridge building for the people, not just the two of them, but for the people to see. Here's one perspective, here's another perspective. This guy's going to lay out his evidence for his claims and his opinions, his worldviews. So is the other guy. You use your intellect. Use your God-given abilities of discernment. Use your biblical knowledge. Use your lived experience to come to your own opinion. We don't have to tell you what to think. We don't have to tell you who you should or shouldn't listen to, or who you're allowed to listen to, or who is simply a distraction. Don't pay attention to them. Focus on the elections. So in summary, guys, I think this was a pretty disappointing answer from Michael Knowles, but probably not surprising, seeing his pattern of history and obviously where his paycheck comes from. I think the Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes interview was great. The content of it, but more importantly, the gesture that is, hey, there are people who are further right than Fox News. And they're human beings, and they love God, and they love this country, and they don't hate anybody, individuals or people groups. They don't hate people of other religions. They don't hate Jews, blacks, women, whatever other minorities, gays. They don't hate any of them. They have criticism, absolutely, just as much as people on the left have criticism of Bible-thumping Christians, just as much as they have criticism of white colonizers, white slaveholders, just as much as they have criticism of capitalists and billionaires. We all have criticism. But most people aren't motivated and fueled by hatred. When they open their mouth and express their criticism, their skepticism, their judgment, whatever it may be, it's not rooted in hatred. It's rooted in, as I said, some misunderstanding or some disagreement that simply needs to be talked through. And I'm not implying that through that conversation, they're going to jump to the other side of the fence or that they're even going to agree with the other person. That's not the point. The point is understanding why people think the way they do. If anti-Semitism is on a meteoric rise, perhaps we should try to understand why that is. Because if you immediately say the only explanation for anti-Semitism being on the rise, or racism being on the rise, misogyny being on the rise, is irrational hatred for Jews or minorities or women or gays or whoever else, it's only ever irrational hatred that can explain somebody having an unorthodox opinion about another religion, about a race, about this group of sexually identifying people who are non-heterosexual, about men and women, the differences between us. None of this is rooted in hatred. And the only reason you see that canard used every time one of these subjects comes up, even from the right side, who are supposed to be the proponents of free speech, they still say, we can't talk about women that way. We can't talk about race with this stereotyping group identity lens. We certainly can't talk about Jews or their religion with any kind of critical angle. Now, you can talk about Islam and be fiercely critical of that. You can say, I don't want a single Muslim living in my country. You can talk about Hindus and Indians and say, really don't want these people in my country. We see Con Inc. do that 24/7. They have a foreign culture. They are a foreign people. They speak foreign languages. They celebrate foreign holidays. When I look at the civilization they built, I don't want that replicated here. They clearly couldn't build what we built over there. Why would I believe that they can perpetuate what we built here? They don't follow the same God that I do. I simply don't have any reason to see why pouring more of them into our country is going to improve our circumstances. How is Judaism an exception to that? Any more than Buddhism or paganism or Sikhism or Satanism, any other religious worldview that is not Christianity, how would adding more of that to America make it a better place? In what world did Jesus Christ say in the New Testament that we must protect other people's religions? That's nowhere in the Bible, the Holy Bible that includes the New Testament. Nowhere does it say, as a Christian, you should absolutely tolerate people worshiping people other than Jesus Christ. The man God himself, it's fine if they worship somebody else. And in fact, if they want to encourage other people to reject Jesus Christ and pursue some other belief about who God is, if they want to proliferate some other religious text, the Bhagavad Gita, the Talmud, well, that's fine. That's harmless. Where does the Bible say that? Nowhere. So, that's my breakdown of Michael Knowles and his reaction as the groyper war is just kicking off. We are dawning a new age where these confrontations, you guys, we've seen a handful of them over the last couple of weeks. Brian Hollyhan getting confronted, Glenn Beck getting confronted and sweating like a pig. Now you see Michael Knowles getting confronted. This is just the beginning, you guys. Seriously. We have 3 more years of this leading up to the next election, the presidential election, and 1.5 years and 1 year up until the midterm. And so this is exactly the prescription we need. We need groypers who are America first, white Christians, confronting the Con Inc. gatekeepers, the Con Inc. pundits, as Michael Knowles calls them, to say none of this is a distraction. Talking about America being a white country, that's not a distraction. I don't hear these words from any of our politicians. Who am I supposed to talk to about this? How about I talk to the people who form the opinions, who form the mind and the worldview of the people? The politicians don't inform people's understanding of what's going on around them. Media does. And sure, media may showcase politicians' speeches or debates, but far more often, the media is driven by pundits, talking heads, podcasters. And so this is exactly what we want to see. Michael Knowles, Matt Walsh needs to be confronted. Tucker needs to continue the dialogue with Nick Fuentes. I'd like to see Nick platformed on other conservative outlets. I'd like to see him on Joe Rogan. He's already done most of the circuit, frankly. At this point, it's already over in terms of his breaking through to the mainstream. So that's going to wrap it up for today's episode, you guys. I hope you enjoyed the change of settings sitting out here in the beautiful outdoors. If you want to support Beholden To Truth, go get yourself one of these anti-Zog tank tops, hoodies, t-shirts, whatever you may need. They're on beholdentotruth.com. Also, the Save Europa merch line is available at beholdentotruth.com. Alternatively, you can support me on Substack, where we have monthly subscriptions, annual subscriptions. You get early access to my long format episodes. You get long format documentaries, breakdowns, stuff like that. So until next time, you guys, take care of yourselves. America first, and Christ is King.
The few brave men who have actually tried to go out and do something about white genocide or talk about Jewish influence, the Zionist-occupied government, we all know that they get crucified, their careers get destroyed, and so we need to find ways to support each other. One of the ways that I have done that is by creating my Substack, where there are exclusive early access to documentaries, my weekly vlogs, there are ebooks there. There's even an opportunity to set up a one-on-one 30-minute Ask Me Anything if you'd like. All of the proceeds from my Substack, from my YouTube channel, from the merch gets reinvested in the platform. I use that to pay my employees. I use that to buy the equipment that I need, the cameras, the lights, the MacBook, all the books, all of the software, pay for marketing, everything else, but also it protects my literal life. So if you want to help out, please do head on to Substack, get yourself a subscription. Thank you. I appreciate it. America first, and Christ is King.